Now,
All right, and let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. We're going to get started here. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Sherry Condor from Brick Utilities, and welcome to our virtual evening at the reservoir. Since we still can't meet in person, I'm hoping next year we'll be able to do workshops in person again. I'd like to introduce Karen Walzer from the Barnegat Bay Partnership, who is our co-host this evening. Virtual Evening at the Reservoir is a collaborative effort between Brick Utilities and the Barnegat Bay Partnership in providing information on creating and maintaining a healthy, water efficient, and environmentally friendly landscape. But before we get into tonight's presentation, let me just give you a quick overview of Brick Utilities. We provide potable water to more than 100,000 residents in Brick, Point Pleasant Borough, Point Pleasant Beach Borough, the Ramtown section of Howe, and the southern portion of Lakewood. Now, this is the Barnegat Bay watershed, and here's the Barnegat Bay estuary. And this is the location of the Metedeconk River watershed, which is the northernmost sub-watershed of the Barnegat Bay watershed. And we get over 80% of our water supply from it. It also provides a significant amount of fresh water to the Barnegat Bay. And one of our missions is to educate residents on ways they can conserve water and help in maintaining and improving water quality within this watershed as well as Barnegat Bay. Karen, would you like to introduce the Barnegat Bay Partnership and Jersey Friendly Yards?
yes, thank you. So the Barnegat Bay Partnership is a national estuary program. There are 28 of them around the country. We're very lucky in New Jersey to have 3 estuary programs. Barnegat Bay Partnership is one of them. And the way the estuary programs work is it's a collaboration between a lot of different organizations, government, academic, business, private organizations, as well as the communities within the watershed who all work together to help protect and restore the water quality and all of the natural resources in the ecosystem. So one of the things that Barnegat Bay Partnership has done is created a website which launched back in 2015 called Jersey Friendly Yards. And the purpose of the website is to provide information to any property owner, actually not only in the Barnegat Bay watershed, but throughout the state of New Jersey, about how they can landscape in order to protect water quality, protect wildlife, and just make New Jersey a healthier place for us all to live. So when you have time, please check out this website, jerseyyards.org. Like I said, it's statewide and it has lots of great information, 8 steps to a Jersey-friendly yard, a searchable plant database for you to find the best plants to put in your yard that match the conditions there, where to buy native plants, and lots more information. So please check it out when you have time. Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you, Karen. And I'd like to introduce Becky Leboy, who is a full-time education outreach specialist with the Ocean County Soil Conservation District. Becky has over 20 years of experience as a formal classroom teacher and an informal environmental educator. She also instructs the Barnegat Bay Volunteer Master Naturalist course and leads birding tours with Ocean County Parks and Recreation. In addition, she serves as co-leader for the Jersey Shore chapter of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. And when she's not doing all that stuff, she enjoys landscaping her own Jersey-friendly yard to attract and support birds and wildlife. So I'm going to pass the baton over to you, Becky.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry.
No.
Thank you for the introduction.
Sure. Let's see. Am I out of here yet? Okay.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending tonight's program, Winter Gardens for Wildlife. Again, my name is Becky Leboy. I'm the Education Outreach Specialist for Ocean County Soil Conservation District. And education is an important part of the district's mission. And the Soil District has developed an education program that is designed to heighten awareness about the importance of natural resources and their conservation and to promote environmental stewardship. I am very fortunate to have the rewarding role of Education Outreach Specialist for the district, and on their behalf, I offer a variety of educational programs that bring awareness to the importance of natural resources, including soil and water, and plants and wildlife. And I encourage stewardship of our natural resources. And your role as a backyard gardener is a really important way for you to be an environmental steward as well. Winter is a really special time of year when nature's beauty sparkles. This year, winter officially begins on December 21st, the day that marks the winter solstice, and the moment when the Earth's North Pole reaches its maximum tilt away from the sun. The first day of winter is also known as the shortest day of the year, or the day with the fewest hours of sunlight. From December 21st onward, the days grow longer, with more minutes of sunlight added each day until we reach the summer solstice on June 22nd, the longest day of the year, when the Earth's North Pole reaches its maximum tilt toward the Earth, or toward the sun. From then on, we begin to lose a few minutes of sunlight each day until the calendar again reads December 21st. The winter solstice is a celebration of light. Sunlight is necessary for all life on Earth to exist. It is also vital for plants to have adequate sunlight in order to photosynthesize. Different plants require a certain number of hours per day of direct sunlight for proper growth and function. Sunlight is also important to the survival of animals. More hours of daylight provides more time for wildlife to forage for food. And limited sunlight in the winter means limited time for foraging. As a wildlife gardener, you can turn your yard into a refuge for wildlife in winter. As with any garden, a wildlife garden starts with the plants. Selecting appropriate native plants that provide direct benefits to wildlife is a wildlife gardener's #1 priority. In winter, animals need food and shelter. Trees and shrubs provide the foundation of a productive landscape for winter wildlife. So I'm going to introduce to you some of the most beneficial tree and shrub species in our neck of the woods that offer food and shelter in the winter months, supplemented with some favorite perennials that continue to support wildlife even during their dormancy. And I'll finish up with some tips about supplemental food and water that you can provide at a feeder station in your yard. The best teacher to consult when learning how wildlife survives in the cold winter months is Mother Nature. A walk in the quiet winter woods reconnects us with nature and reacquaints us with the animals who live there. Their identities are revealed by the tracks they leave in the snow. Raccoon, possum, deer, red fox, chipmunk, squirrel, sparrow. The plants provide the basic needs for the survival of wildlife in winter. Pine trees produce cones, which hold protein-rich seeds encased within a perfect protective package. And with the right tools to extract them, the seeds are an excellent source of energy for wildlife. This red-breasted nuthatch uses her tiny tweezer-like bill to ever so slightly lift the scales of the cone and pull out the seeds. This native red squirrel gnaws off the scales with her sharp teeth one at a time to find a nutritious snack. The numerous layers of the thick bark on the pine tree provide refuge for overwintering insects. But this red-bellied woodpecker has just the right tools to locate and extract. He clings to the trunk with his strong feet and strong talons, and he uses his tail as a brace, and the tips of his wings overlap, keeping his body compact and balanced. He taps with his strong pointy beak and extends his long sensitive tongue beneath the bark and carefully feels for his prey. Once located, his sticky tongue tip pulls out the protein-rich morsel. By fall, the Eastern Red Cedar, a common evergreen tree in New Jersey woodlands, is loaded with berry-like cones, which feed numerous species of birds, including the American robin, fish crow eats Eastern Red Cedar berries. Fish crow is an endemic bird of the United States, found nowhere else in the world. This young cedar waxwing is benefiting from the abundance of berries produced by Eastern Red Cedar, the tree for whom it is named. And yellow-rumped warblers gorge on the berries of Eastern Red Cedar during fall migration. So many birds depend on this tree's berries for food, especially in the winter, when the berries are abundant and persist throughout the colder months. And the birds, in turn, provide the important service of seed dispersal, which is insurance for woodlands. This tree is common in both the coastal plain region of New Jersey, along the coast on barrier islands, and in the uplands of both northern and southern Jersey. And not only is it native throughout our state, its nativity extends the entire eastern half of the United States. It is one of the first trees to occupy disturbed soils, making it an early successional tree. Although it will tolerate some shade as a sapling, it needs sunlight as it matures. It makes a lovely native privacy border or natural fence for a yard. The evergreen boughs of Eastern Red Cedar provide a shield from the snow and insulation from the cold. This tree offers a safe place for this northern saw-whet owl to have a peaceful meal. Without evergreens such as this one, small owls and other songbirds would be vulnerable to predators, including the many raptors that actively hunt in our woodlands and in our yards in the winter. One of the most ubiquitous and important native trees of New Jersey is the mighty oak. This particular specimen, named the Salem Oak after the county in which it once resided, was a champion tree in New Jersey until its death in 2019. The species is Eastern White Oak. It was more than 100 feet tall with a trunk circumference of 22 feet and a crown spread of 104 feet. It was over 500 years old, much older than the expected lifetime of a white oak tree, which is typically 100 to 200 years old. The longevity and majesty of white oaks is also appreciated by wildlife. Large old trees provide shelter for wildlife and a nesting place for owls who raise their owlets during the winter months. In fact, you may hear the hooting of a great horned owl outside your window this time of year, late at night or in the early hours of the morning, as mated pairs call for each other and declare their territories. All oaks produce acorns, which are food for lots of wildlife, including wild turkeys, ruffed grouse, blue jays, squirrels, deer, and others. Blue jays gather and cache acorns in the fall, building up their storage in preparation for winter. But not all of the acorns they hide are refound, and this leads to the propagation of new oak trees. They are said to have repopulated or reforested New Jersey's oak tree population after most of the oak trees were harvested for lumber in the early 18th and 19th centuries. Willow oak is one of my favorite oak species. I have several growing in my yard of various ages. Willow oak is predominantly a southern New Jersey species within the Piedmont and coastal plain border. It has an unusual, very un-oak-like shape to its leaves, a single narrow blade similar to the shape of a willow leaf. And this blue-headed vireo is gleaning caterpillars and other insects from this large willow oak, and its fall colors are stunning. So if your goal is to support wildlife in your yard, the oak tree is your tree. According to Dr. Doug Tallamy, author of the book, Bringing Nature Home, oak trees are host to over 500 species of caterpillars, including the polyphemus moth. In the fall, polyphemus moth caterpillars curl up within the leaves to pupate or spend the winter. It started out this tiny. After they undergo metamorphosis, they emerge as a beautiful polyphemus moth. The 500 plus species of caterpillars that use oak as their host plant spend the winter burrowed in crevices under the bark. And in the spring, these tiny caterpillars provide an important source of food for hungry migrating songbirds who are desperate for food as they make their long journey north to breed. Like this northern parula, a species of warbler. They depend on the numerous tiny caterpillars found on oak trees to provide them with the fuel they need to sustain their energy for their long trip. Gray tree frogs also benefit from oak trees. They spend most of their time high in the trees and are well camouflaged to blend in with the bark. The tree frog leaves the safety of the trees to breed in nearby ponds and will readily accept a man-made pond or a vernal pool or basin located within the deciduous or mixed oak pine woodlands. By creating appropriate habitat in your yard, you can attract this tiny and special creature. In the winter, they hibernate under tree roots, under logs, and in leaves, reminding us that it's not necessary to pick up every fallen branch nor rake up every leaf. You can find a place for them in your garden as natural decor. Gray birch is one of several birch trees that are native to New Jersey. These small trees reach maximum heights between 20 to 40 feet. They maintain a slender trunk and a narrow crown and have a relatively short lifespan of 15 to 30 years. But even after they're no longer standing, they continue to provide shelter and protection for wildlife. This common nighthawk pretends she's a gray birch tree during the day. No leaves are needed to help her hide. The gray camouflage colors of the bark conceal her presence from predators. This beautiful tree volunteered in my yard, most likely a gift from the birds. It is a sweetgum. Sweetgum is a typical plant of the swamps and floodplains of the Piedmont, and the hardwood swamp forest of the intercoastal plain, where the soil is rich. However, this tree can be found growing throughout our state. New Jersey is the northern border of its range, which stretches south to Florida and west to Texas. My property is neither in a floodplain nor a swamp, and this sweet gum is healthy and happy in my dry, sandy soil. It actually tolerates a wide range of soil conditions, except for alkaline soils. It needs full sun and is intolerant of shade. It is a conical shape when young, as you can see here, but grows a rounded crown as it ages. And it's considered a medium to large tree, and it can reach heights of about 60 to 75 feet and has a very straight trunk. And the tree can be easily recognized by its stems, leaves, and fruits. The leaves are star-shaped with 5 to 7 pointed, fine-toothed lobes. They turn amazing yellow and purple and red and orange colors in the fall. And the branches and stems have wing-like corky ridges, which are helpful when identifying this tree in the winter. Sweet gum trees are considered monoecious, which means they have separate male and female flowers, but both are found on the same tree. So all the trees will have fruit. In this photo, on the top are the male flowers, the staminate flowers, containing the stamen and the pollen. And hanging down are the female flowers, the pistillate flowers, containing the sticky stigma, ready to receive the pollen. The female flowers are termed capitulate, which means there are many very small flowers all attached at the same point on the flowering stem. The female flowers are wind pollinated. The wind blows the pollen from the male flowers on top to the female flowers on the bottom, after which the male flowers wilt and fall to the ground and the female flowers mature. The ovary swells into a pointy gumball fruit, protecting both the fertile seeds where pollen successfully fertilize the flowers and also the unfertilized seeds whose flowers were not successfully pollinated. However, both seeds contain nutrients for the birds that eat them. And right in the center of this photo is a female red-winged blackbird foraging in a sweet gum tree. And to the bottom right is a photo of the more recognizable male, showing off his red shoulder patch called an epaulette. And along with red-winged blackbirds, finches, chickadees, wrens, sparrows, quail, chipmunks, and many other birds and wildlife eat the seeds of the sweet gum tree. This is an enormously important food source for birds in the winter. Once the gumballs fall, birds scratch the snow-covered ground, searching for the tiny seeds. And if you need more convincing to consider a sweet gum in your yard, it's host plant for more than 30 species of butterfly and moth caterpillars, including the gorgeous Luna moth. This northern parula, an early spring migrant, is a small warbler who spends the winter in South and Central America. And during this time, moth and butterfly caterpillars, including Promethea moth, pale swallowtail, and spice bush swallowtail, as well as other insects, spend the winter in the bark, buds, and leaves of this sassafras tree. And in the spring, as the migrating warbler makes his way north, the slender sassafras tree is his supermarket. The yellow flowers that bloom in April through May also provide a nectar source for bees. And scarlet tanagers feed on the insects and also benefit from the deep purple-blue colored berries that ripen on bright red stems in September. A dioecious plant, both male and female sassafras trees are needed to produce the fruit, which is actually considered a drupe because it contains just a single seed inside. The female scarlet tanager is yellow, and the male is scarlet with black wings, and he's actually holding a mulberry in his bill. Sassafras has 4 distinct leaf shapes: a typical single blade, a turkey's foot, a left mitten, and a right mitten. The mittens are each a separate shape, not just the leaf flipped over. This 4-leaf shape characteristic makes sassafras an easy tree to identify. In the fall, the foliage turns beautiful shades of yellow, orange, scarlet, and purple. The best results for fruit and foliage color are achieved when sassafras is planted in groups. It's a shrubby tree in its youth, but it can grow dense foliage and a nice pyramidal shape as it matures, and can reach heights of 60 feet. If you don't plant it in groups, the tree may do it for you through suckers, and it will take on the appearance of a large multi-branched shrub. It is easily grown in dry to moist, acidic soils, sandy, clay, or loam, and in full sun or part shade. And deer typically do not browse on sassafras. The butterfly and moth larvae, the caterpillars, they are able to digest any toxic chemicals found in sassafras. And here, a spicebush swallowtail caterpillar starts life out looking like a bird dropping. And as it grows, it begins to look fierce with large black eyes that can see from all angles. Or so it would like for you to believe. The caterpillar's head is actually this small, buffy colored round disc below a very menacing looking but fake mouth. And it can also be yellow with large eye spots. And this individual is eating spicebush leaves. Spicebush is at the top of my list of beautiful wildlife-friendly shrubs. Spicebush prefers part shade, but also grows in full sun and also tolerates heavy shade. So it makes a great understory plant. It grows between 6 to 12 feet with a 6 to 12 foot spread. And in the wild, it is found growing in moist ravines, valleys, and along streams. But in a backyard setting, such as mine, the shade helps to prevent the soil from drying out. It is also dioecious with separate male and female plants, and the female plants produce red drupes that ripen in the fall, providing a fall and winter food source for birds. And small yellow flowers open in early spring in March, providing nectar to early emerging insects. And spicebush is a host plant for the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar. And it is also host for the eastern tiger swallowtail. The spicebush swallowtail pupa on the right attaches itself to a leaf where it will spend the winter. The leaf will drop from the tree, so the caterpillar and its leafy winter home will become part of the leaf litter. But unfortunately, we humans, we rake up the leaves and throw them away along with spicebush swallowtails, and along with numerous other moth and butterfly caterpillars who have wrapped themselves inside leaves that fall to the forest floor or fall to the lawns of our yards for the winter. So this is where I'll make my pitch for leaving the leaves. spicebush swallowtail is a gorgeous butterfly to attract to your yard with the proper trees and shrubs and leaves. This beautiful Cecropia moth is drying its wings on the bark of its host plant, wild black cherry. And it too is a casualty of discarded leaves. Leaves of the black cherry tree contain toxic cyanide-forming compounds. Cecropia moth caterpillars are specialists who co-evolved with the black cherry and are able to eat and digest the leaves without harm, similar to the mutualistic relationship between monarch caterpillars and toxic milkweed. Native cherry trees, such as this one, are much touted by Dr. Doug Tallamy, as was the oak tree. They're host to numerous caterpillars. The Cecropia moth caterpillar is a beautiful shade of green, marked with blue, orange, and yellow. And they can grow quite large, like this one, measuring over 4 inches. And when they're ready to pupate, it wraps itself in the wild black cherry leaves of its host plant, and then eventually it morphs into a strikingly beautiful Cecropia moth. This black-throated green warbler is perched on an American holly, another native tree that provides shelter and food for wildlife throughout much of the year and is especially important as a winter food source. It's an easily recognizable evergreen tree, but instead of having needle-like leaves typically found on many evergreens, it has broad leaves like the oaks. Interestingly, most holly species in North America are shrubs, and most are deciduous. American holly, Ilex opaca, is a dominant tree in many forest communities throughout New Jersey. However, New Jersey is at the northern border of its range, which stretches south into Florida and west into Texas. It is considered a small to medium tree, reaching heights of 20 to 40 feet. It has a conical upright shape and smooth, pale gray bark. American holly trees take a long time to grow. It is also dioecious, so there are plants with only male flowers called staminate flowers, and plants with only female flowers, the pistillate flowers, which bear the fruit. And tiny greenish white flowers bloom on each year's new growth. And the flowers are extremely attractive to pollinators. So in early spring, when the flowers are in bloom, I can hear the whole tree buzzing from the sound of small native bees and other beneficial insects looking for pollen and nectar. And then the female flowers give way to fruit that starts off green, turns yellow in late summer, and ripens to red in fall. This blue-gray gnatcatcher comes north to breed, and many raise their families in New Jersey, where they can glean caterpillars and other insects from Native American holly trees. The berries persist throughout the winter, offering a crucial food source for many different birds. Flocks of American robins, numbering in the hundreds, scour the woods in winter looking for holly berries. Not only do trees provide fruits, nuts, berries, and seeds, they also provide perches from which raptors can hunt and also dine. It's always exciting to see a raptor in the yard. It's fun to have a species in the yard representing the top of the food chain. And that tells me that I'm on the right track with creating a healthy ecosystem in my yard, starting with the right plants. One of the most exciting winter bird watching experiences in my yard is our eastern screech owl. Because we lack old trees with large cavities, we installed a nest box several years ago, and we've been delighted to have an owl or two spend each winter in our backyard. We've had different individuals over the years, and we can tell because some of the owls are the red morph, shown here, and some are the gray morph. And at least one year, we had two owls, and we knew because they were different morphs. But no owls have raised young in our nest box yet, maybe this year. It brings us much pleasure to watch them from our kitchen window, peering out of the box, warming up in the early morning hours of the sun, or looking around the yard intently at dusk, listening for a mouse scurrying in the grass. Our screech owls are due back any day now. And last week we cleaned out the nest box in preparation for their arrival. They had lined the bottom of the box last year with dried grass, and we found pellets and bones and feathers, including the feathers of an unlucky blue jay or two and cardinal, among other birds. It's sad to think that the birds we see daily at our feeders are the owl's next meal, but it's important to root for the raptors who ensure a healthy ecosystem. So now that we've identified a good number of trees that benefit a winter garden, let's identify a few native shrubs, which also offer important food sources for birds, as well as cover in the wintertime. Evergreen Inkberry holly, a cousin of the American holly, not only retains its green leaves all year, its berries also persist throughout the winter. And birds such as the Swainson's thrush depend on these berries for energy and sustenance. Berries make up most of their diet in the winter. Winterberry holly, another member of the holly family, has red berries. And like Inkberry holly, this plant is dioecious, which means there are separate male and female plants, as I've explained. And on the left is the male flower housing the pollen on its anthers. And on the right, the female flowers have a stigma on the tip of the style. And the stigma awaits the delivery of the pollen by small native bees. Both the male and the female plant are needed for fertilization, but only the female will bear the fruit. And unlike Inkberry holly, the Winterberry holly is deciduous. So its leaves will drop in the fall, but the red berries will remain on the branches for the birds to eat throughout the winter. Sweet pepper bush, another common native New Jersey shrub, can be easily recognized in winter by its dried fruit that resemble peppercorns. The seeds within are consumed by many birds, including this American goldfinch. They hold and crack the small, hard seed in their strong beak, and their flexible, ridged tongue manipulates and discards the shell while extracting the meat. Before sweet pepper bush develops its seed pods enjoyed by goldfinches in winter, It develops sweet-smelling flowers in the summer that attract a variety of pollinating insects, including soldier beetles, which feed on the pollen, and spice bush swallowtail butterflies, which feed on the nectar. And these pollinators ensure pollination, which leads to fertilization, which results in the fruit. And as the fruit matures, so do the seeds developing inside each round fruit capsule. Birds with small enough bills can feed on the small fruit capsules, but their beaks also need to be strong enough to crack them open. And this brightly colored bird is a male house finch. And like its cousin, the American goldfinch, it also has a small yet stout and strong bill made for cracking open hard seeds. And it too has a tongue with ridges that can hold the shell of the seed and also manipulate and extract the meat inside at the same time. Northern bayberry is an upright, multi-trunked, semi-evergreen shrub with narrow evergreen leaves. And it can potentially grow quite large, up to 10 feet in height, and it will spread through underground shoots. Its dense foliage makes northern bayberry a nice choice for a privacy wall, or it can be pruned as a hedge, and it thrives in poor soil and is extremely drought tolerant, although it can survive in wet soils as well. And this plant fixes atmospheric nitrogen, which helps it survive in stressed environments, such as a seaside garden or poor rocky soils, and in my backyard, where I let nature do all the watering. It can also be used for erosion control, stabilizing loose soils, as a windbreak, or as a privacy fence. It is extremely versatile and hardy. Flowers are dioecious, so a male and female plant are needed for the female to bear the fruit. And pictured here are the male flowers, or the staminate flowers, housing the stamen and the pollen. And you can see a dusting of pollen on the leaves. And these are the female flowers getting ready to receive the windblown pollen. They bloom in the early spring, around April, from second ear stems. And the waxy berries grow in tight clusters along the length of the stems. They have low water content and are high in lipids. And the fruit ripens in October and remains on the plant well into the winter, providing food to birds during the coldest months of December and January. And that's what makes this plant so special and why I have several in my yard. Because of its late winter leaf and fruit retention, it provides good protective cover and food for many species of birds, including bobwhite quail, ruffed grouse, eastern meadowlark, gray catbird, red-bellied woodpeckers, and migratory swallows. This flock of tree swallows descends on this grouping of northern bayberry shrubs and devours the fruit. This important food source provides much needed energy as the birds prepare for their journey south for the winter. And northern bayberry is an important host plant for caterpillars of the Columbia silk moth and many other species. This gray catbird is eyeing the ripe red berries on this winged sumac as it displays its beautiful fall foliage. Winged sumac berries are an important food source for birds. The berries are generally low in crude protein, fats, and calcium, but nonetheless provide a vital food source in fall and winter when food is otherwise scarce. American robins rely on the berries during wintertime. Often thought of as migrants, robins are actually not true migrants. Instead, the populations shift southward. They leave our yards when the ground is too cold and hard to forage for worms and other invertebrates living in the soil, and they congregate in large flocks in the woods looking for berries, including American holly, Eastern Red Cedar, and winged sumac. By planting these powerhouse food sources in your yard, wildlife will follow. Brown thrashers also benefit from sumac berries. And the elegant yellow-billed cuckoo was photographed sitting in the sumac. Cuckoos actually have an affinity for hairy caterpillars. And as part of their mating ritual, a male cuckoo will present his mate with a caterpillar. And if she accepts, they will copulate. Up to 95% of the diet of many fall migrating songbirds consists of berries and seeds. Orioles, mockingbirds, waxwings, thrashers, and thrushes all benefit from fruit-producing shrubs and trees in our yard. It's no wonder that fruit-bearing trees and shrubs offer berries that ripen in late summer to fall and persist throughout the winter. It's a co-evolutionary strategy for both the plants and the birds to survive and to spread the seeds to grow the next generation. All of these trees and shrubs we've talked about are native to New Jersey. Native plants provide the most benefits because native plants and native wildlife co-evolved. Native animals have just the right adaptations, just the right tools to be able to find, extract, digest, and metabolize the food offered by native plants with minimal investment in energy. There are some non-native plants that also provide benefits to wildlife, and they are acceptable to add to your Jersey-friendly garden. Invasive species, however, are not acceptable in a Jersey-friendly wildlife garden. So what is a native plant exactly? A native plant is considered to have occurred here prior to European colonization. Because of the long evolutionary relationship a native plant has formed with its environment, it is adapted to local conditions, including local soil and climate. It has natural defenses to local diseases and pests. Over evolutionary time, it has formed complex relationships with other plants and animals. And as an important part of the ecosystem, native plants support pollinators, wildlife, and biodiversity. So what is a non-native plant? Non-native plants have been introduced by humans from other regions. Some are considered friendly. They play nice in the environment, meaning they don't take over space or use up resources that are needed by native plants. Purple coneflower is an example of an acceptable non-native plant. It is native to the prairies of the Midwestern United States. However, some plants are not acceptable. They're not native, they're not friendly, and they are considered invasive species. Callery pear, butterfly bush, burning bush, Japanese barberry, purple loosestrife. These are all invasive species. An invasive species is a non-native plant whose introduction causes or is likely to cause harm to the environment or harm to the economy. Invasive species outcompete other plants for resources, and they take over land and choke out and strangle trees and shrubs. And because they did not evolve in the new landscape, many of them provide very little, if any, ecological value. Some that do provide food resources, such as berries that birds eat, those seeds are spread far and wide, and the growth of these invasive species becomes overwhelming to the natural landscape. And invasive species are literally changing our native forests, meadows, wetlands, and other natural ecosystems of our beautiful state. Invasive species are a detriment to the ecological integrity of our planet as we know it. The Jersey Friendly Yards website has about 400 plants in our database. A little over 300 of them are native to New Jersey. And we do include in our database some commonly planted, non-native, but non-invasive species, such as purple coneflower and threadleaf coreopsis, blue giant hyssop, and woodland poppy are some. These plants are not considered invasive, and importantly, they provide ecological value to the landscape. They provide food, nesting material, nesting structures, shelter for pollinators, birds, and other wildlife. They don't require copious amounts of water or fertilizers, and some provide erosion control and stabilization and other services like that. The plants that you choose for your garden should align with the conditions in your yard, including the soil texture, soil moisture, and the amount of sunlight, full sun, part sun, or shade. When using native plants, wildlife gardens can be designed to look very tidy. Or to look more natural and wild, or somewhere in between. You can start planning and preparing your wildlife garden now. Fall is a great time to get a new garden started before winter, or get your current garden ready for the winter. If you're starting a garden from scratch, for example, turning your lawn into a garden bed, prepare your beds now so they have time to rest over the coming winter months. This small butterfly garden, located at Jake's Branch County Park in Beechwood, New Jersey, was transformed from lawn to garden. A technique called sheet mulching, also called lasagna gardening, was applied, and I'll tell you how it works. So this is Lisa. Lisa's a Jersey-friendly gardener, and this is Ray, a New Jersey watershed ambassador at the time, laying down the first layer of hay within the pre-measured footprint of the garden. The hay smothers the grass and at the same time adds organic matter as it decomposes. On top of the hay, they placed large sheets of cardboard, and on top of the cardboard, they added a layer of compost, which they got from the county for free. And there is the foundation. Another thick layer of mulch was laid down on top of this layering as well, and this was all completed in December of 2018. In June the following year, the garden was ready for planting. Scouts planted some deer-resistant native perennials that the park staff selected from the Jersey Friendly Yards plant database. The cardboard was not completely broken down, But after a winter of rain and snow, it was very easily broken through with shovels. And the remaining cardboard, the compost, and mulch offered weed control and helped keep the soil moist throughout the summer growing season. Lush green plants produced lots of flower buds, which offered tremendous summer blooms. And once the flowers have done their job attracting pollinators and rewarding them for helping to fertilize the plants, the fertilized fruits mature and the seeds develop. And these seeds are a vital source of food for birds and wildlife in fall and winter. Because of the garden's exposure to deer, many of the plants planted are in the mint family, which offer effective deer resistance. Yet the flowers in the mint family are extremely attractive to pollinators throughout the growing season. And here is a silver-spotted skipper nectaring on blue giant hyssop. Spotted horse mint is attractive to large bees, in particular female carpenter bees, whose bodies fit perfectly inside each flower. The bees are rewarded for their visits with nectar, and they pay back the plant with free cross-pollination services. Dangling just under the top lip of the flower are the male and female reproductive parts. And here is the anther, which holds the pollen. And here is the sticky stigma, which receives the pollen. And once the pollen has been transferred to the stigma, it travels down the long style, which leads to the ovary and the egg that awaits fertilization. As the carpenter bee crawls inside the flower, its back brushes against the anther, picking up some pollen, and also brushes against the stigma, dropping off some pollen. Hopefully from a different flower the bee recently visited. The more flowers the bee visits, the higher the chance for cross-pollination and diversifying the gene pool. Wild bergamot, also a mint, is another beautiful native plant planted in the garden, and it is also very attractive to bees and pollinators. It blooms in June, and its flowers continue to offer nectar, pollen, and beauty for much of the summer season. Dried pods now take the place of brightly colored flowers and buzzing bees. But the dried fruits have a beauty all their own. Each of the flowers in the ensemble produce their own seeds. Seeds that aren't found and eaten by birds may grow into another flower the following spring. Another wildlife-friendly perennial is woodland sunflower. In the summer, when I stand next to the flowers, I can see dozens and dozens of insects flying about, gathering nectar and pollen. As the fertilized flowers drop their petals, signaling they no longer offer nectar, the maturing seeds begin to attract the goldfinches. They alight on the stems and select a spent flower. And with their bill, they appear to pull out tiny seeds. I like to watch their acrobatics as they reach and stretch towards the flowers. This delightful show continues for more than a month while the flowers continuously bloom and fade into September. By October, the flowers, stems, and leaves of the woodland sunflower have all turned brown. And it is then that I notice chickadees take their turn foraging seed. Bushy flowering plants provide cover for wildlife in the summer, but gardeners have been conditioned to cut back stems to the ground in fall or late winter. But our avian friends will benefit from the protection and cover provided by tall standing stems throughout the winter season. Wait until spring if you can to cut back stems, or cut some stems but leave others standing. Beneficial insects who use the stems as overwintering habitat will also benefit. And these insects will in turn provide more food for birds the following spring and summer. September, October, and November are important months for migrating birds. They are searching for seeds to keep their energy up during their long journey. Many overwintering birds depend on these seeds too, including white-crowned sparrow, white-throated sparrow, American tree sparrow, and dark-eyed junco, which is a species of sparrow. These species all arrive in the fall, spend the winter in New Jersey, and then head north again in the spring. When the snow covers your garden, many of the standing stems retain their seeds, allowing foraging opportunities for birds. When the snow prevents the birds from finding fallen seed, you can clear the snow from the ground in a small area of your yard and lay down store-bought seed, readily available for hungry birds to easily find and consume while wasting little energy. Sparrows, including this fox sparrow, like to hop and scratch the ground for seed. So I usually throw a mix of small seeds, including millet, on the ground for the sparrows to find. Birds live their lives on constant alert as they continuously forage, as they hop around and scratch the ground looking for fallen seeds, berries, and nuts. They benefit from your standing vegetation, as well as from your shrubs and trees that all provide places to escape and hide. To offer more cover for birds, you can create brush piles in your yard for a quick escape. You may think brush piles look like a little messy pile of sticks, but I encourage you to think of it as part of your overall bird-friendly landscape, an important component within your backyard wildlife sanctuary. This Cooper's hawk was thwarted this time, but she'll be back. No need to mulch the leaves or send them to the curb. Gently rake or blow them into your garden beds, where the Promethea moth and spice bush swallowtail caterpillars will spend the winter. The fallen leaves offer insulation to the soil and to the plants whose roots lay dormant underground. The leaves also provide hiding places and camouflage for many creatures, all of whom are an important part of the ecosystem. Think about adding a feeder station to your wildlife garden. Feeders can supplement nature's food and can make the difference between life and death for many birds during winter. Having a feeder in your yard allows for continued enjoyment watching the birds and learning about their many adaptations they have to survive the challenges of nature. Watch the finches sit at your feeder and work on one seed at a time. With just the use of their beak and tongue, they hold a seed, crack it open, extract the meat, and discard the shell. Not all birds can do that. For example, unlike the seed-crushing bill of the finch, the bill of the tufted titmouse is slim, strong, and made for hammering. The tufted titmouse will take a seed from your feeder, fly to a nearby perch, hold the seed under its toes, and you can watch as it pecks on the husk with its pointy bill to open it up and then eats the meat. Black oil sunflower seeds are preferred by many birds, including our beautiful cardinals. And this purple finch is feeding on smaller thistle seeds. Peanuts are also a favorite and provide high fat and protein content. A downy woodpecker and a Carolina wren tolerate each other at the feeder at the same time in these extenuating circumstances of a cold and snowy day. On cold winter days, water can be difficult for birds and wildlife to find. Having a heated bird bath available means the birds will have a steady source of fresh and clean water. Natural habitats are dwindling, but you can replace important wildlife habitat in your yard. Native trees, shrubs, and flowering perennials that produce nuts, fruits, berries, and seeds are all vital components of a wildlife-friendly landscape. They provide the food, shelter, and protection that birds and other wildlife need in the winter. Turn your yard into a refuge for wildlife in winter, and you will be rewarded daily by nature's beauty. Many thanks to these wonderful photographers who kindly shared their amazing photos. I am happy to take any questions now, or feel free to reach out to me by email. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you for that wonderful, wonderful presentation.
You're so welcome.
Karen, are there any questions for Becky today?
Yes. Anna is asking, when in spring is it safe to remove the tall stems that were left all winter?
That is a frequently asked question, and it's a very good question. I try to wait as long as I can before I remove stems, and then I actually don't remove the stems. So, for example, I would say April or May to go out and maybe just cut your stems, leaving 6 to 8 inches. And I say that because a lot of the plants, your perennials, are going to grow back in, and I've found that the stems actually offer a little bit of structure for the rest of my plants as they grow in, especially the bushy ones that tend to fall over. So it's almost like having, you might purchase a metal structure to hold your plants up, but if you leave the very stiff stems, 6 to 8 inches, 12 inches of them, depending, that actually helps with allowing the plants to stand up on their own. And if you do cut the stems, you can actually lay them down right in your garden. They will naturally decompose, and any insects that were overwintering in the stems won't be discarded, let's say, to a compost pile or somewhere else. They can emerge in their own time if you leave the stems laying down in your garden.
Jill is asking, well, she thinks that she has pokeweed growing in her neighborhood, and she's wondering if birds will eat the pokeweed berries, sorry.
Yeah, so pokeweed, which is that it has a very, almost like a bright pink stem, and its root structure is almost like a giant turnip, and then it has pretty big leaves, and its berries are in clusters, and they dangle down, and they're almost like a purplish black color, and the stems on which the berries grow are a kind of a bright pink color. And believe it or not, this is actually a native plant. Some folks actually grow it purposefully. It can grow into a really beautiful shaped, almost like a shrub sized plant. And the birds absolutely love the berries of pokeweed. So they plant them in my yard. And every year I have several pokeberry plants, pokeweed plants growing in my yard. And depending on where it's growing, I might allow it to live, or if it's growing in a place that I have I'll just say a little bit more formal of a garden. Not that any of my gardens are formal, but if it's in a place I don't want it, I'll pull it out. Yes, indeed, the birds will absolutely love you for leaving pokeweed pokeberry plant.
Is spice bush deer resistant?
That's a good question. I'm going to say I think it is, but there's one way that we can absolutely find out, and that's to go to the Jersey Friendly Yards database, which is jerseyyards.org. And the database will have lots of information. So I'm actually going to. Are you looking it up?
Double check it. I feel like it is, but let's be sure. I feel like it's somewhat. Let's find out. Okay, deer resistance, it does have some. It's not highly, but it has some deer resistance.
Let me just say, if it's a really bad year, deer will eat anything and everything. They'll even start eating the evergreens and stuff.
Yes.
So.
Okay.
So here's the Jersey Friendly website, jerseyyards.org. Here's the database. So just so folks can kind of see what we're doing behind the scenes here. We went to the database, clicked on the database, and then here's the search filters, and we're typing in spice bush. And here it is right here, pops up. And we can take a look at all the plant details and deer resistance. So that's how you can look up all your plants by either typing in their name, or you can go to the search filters. And if you're purposefully looking for any plant that's deer resistant, you can just go to deer resistance, hit high, and all the deer resistant plants will pop up in your list. And then you can refocus. You can, if you just want to look for deer resistant flowers or deer resistant trees or deer resistant shrubs, you can narrow down your choices that way as well.
All right, so this Barbara's saying, I've lived in my house for 5 years. I've been adding native plants, leaving leaves, providing a great environment for wildlife, but that has caused a tremendous amount of mosquitoes. What do you all do about them? It's worse this year than in the past, and I can't even enjoy my yard.
So you must live near the bay.
I wouldn't blame the native plants.
Yeah,
water. There's somewhere there's some shallow water sources that they're breeding in.
Mm-hmm. One of our Jersey friendly gardeners, Phyllis, whose yard I've showcased many times in many of our programs, she actually purposefully has a bucket of water that she leaves out in her garden. And within it, she puts what's called mosquito dunks. And they are I think it's a type of bacteria. Don't quote me. I'd have to look at it. Karen, you're saying yes. Okay. And so basically it's not toxic to like other animals that happen to find this bucket of water. The mosquito comes and lays the eggs, and they just make the eggs unviable. So the mosquito larva will never hatch out. Is that correct, Karen? Is that how that dunk works? Yeah. So she purposefully attracts the mosquitoes to this bucket of water, and then she just cuts off the reproduction right there. I thought that was pretty smart. Maybe something that can be tried in your yard.
Is there a best time in the year to remove invasive non-native plants or ground covers? And she was wondering if autumn is a good time to do that. Probably any time is the best time to do that, right?
Yeah, definitely anytime. I don't think, the plant will be removed, it will benefit, the plant any more or less in any different time of year. But I'm thinking if there's any, of course, if the plant doesn't have leaves in the wintertime and you're not able to identify it, then you might want to, do it at some point of time during the year where it's identifiable, so that you're pulling out your invasive species, a vine or something, rather than something that you want to leave in there to grow. But I will say, and I need to take my own advice, is to nip it in the bud as soon as possible, because all of the, Chinese privet and all these other vines that I have growing in my back field have berries now. And if I didn't get to them, if I'd gotten to them sooner, they would not have these berries, and I would have stopped reproduction. But unfortunately, I did not get to them quick enough. So they're going to be spreading their berries. The birds are going to be eating their berries and spreading this plant all over the place. So good question. Now, I guess the answer is now. Yesterday.
Do birds eat Celosia seeds? Jill says, I'm not sure if I should leave the plants when they die off.
I'm sorry, what was the name of the plant?
Celosia. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but I think that's not a native, I believe. It might even be an annual. I'll do a quick check.
Was it Celosia?
Oh, it's in the amaranth family.
Oh, okay. I
think
yeah, that's a really pretty one. Hey, Jill,
yeah.
how are you? I was over. Jill's another Jersey friendly gardener. She has a beautiful Jersey friendly yard. One of the photos in here was Jill's beautiful yard, and she has this growing in her yard this year. What was her question again?
Should she leave the seeds for the wildlife? Would that be something they would eat, the birds?
Oh, good question. I'm not familiar if the birds would, eat these seeds. Birds don't necessarily eat every seed or every berry. There's some that they just, don't eat for whatever reason. So native seeds, I would guess that most native seeds, your best bet is native seeds if your, goal is to feed wildlife. This plant right here is beautiful. It's friendly, but see, benefits, attracts pollinators and wildlife, bees and other pollinators, butterflies, birds. My assumption that here the birds are going to be eating the seeds unless they're using the fluffy material as nesting material. So it's probably one or the other.
Okay. And then a follow-up by Jill. Would you know if birds would eat false indigo seeds?
I would think so. Yeah, they're let's see. They are not native to New Jersey, this plant, Baptisia Australis. However, I think they're native to the United States. They are native to central United States or the Midwest, I remember correctly. They have a seed pod. They get a really big, beautiful flower early in the season, and that then turns into this big fruit pod, almost like a bean pod. And they are actually a legume. And it actually rattles when you shake it, so it has relatively large seeds inside, and I would think that the birds would consume these. That would be my guess. And attracts pollinators and wildlife butterflies. So it doesn't have birds listed on here, so I'd have to.
Yeah, I Googled
Do some
around
more
a little
research
bit.
on
Some
that.
sites said that birds eat them, but they didn't really give specifics. Sure, they're reputable. And I
So
think that was
the-
the last question that I can see.
That's it. Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. For those of you who are left on the thing, we have recorded this program and I will be sending out the link for it. I also put in the chat that Dr. Doug Talame has a talk that was pre-recorded that the New Jersey Forestry Association is hosting this Thursday. I have the link there. I'll also send more information about that out to you as well and all. So with that, if there's no other questions, I thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.